We're talking about the power and the outreach that the Black Lives Matter hashtag in regards to activism as well as a movement has in America today. And I want to read a quote and take this to Dr. Waverly Duck and eventually to the Get to the Point panel. This is from my good friend Morris O'Kelly, who is a BBC political commentator as well as the host of the Mo Kelly Show. He writes a piece earlier this week and he says, and I quote, "I've never been a supporter of the hashtag Black Lives Matter or much of the associated hashtag activism. For many in this millennial generation, simply changing one's Facebook profile picture, sending out a tweet with a trending hashtag, or sharing the latest story which affirms their outrage, though at times justified, is the sum total of their contribution. Such behavior is lazy, disingenuous, and ill-conceived in generating momentum for a movement. I've never been a supporter of the hashtag. Its use set in motion the predictable and invariable response, with more time being spent debating the efficacy and accuracy of Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. The result has been wasted resources and wasted social capital. Yet, for what it's worth, the world around us offers little evidence of All Lives Matter to be true. The point of Black Lives Matter is to convey the specific group of people who do not enjoy the support, protection, or respect of the world. All Lives Matter denies the discrepancy between condemning President Obama's remarks regarding Trayvon Martin as divisive and race-baiting, while also praising Donald Trump's remarks on Mexicans as refreshing or telling it like it is. Is the hashtag Black Lives Matter inartful? Probably. But this wasn't ever about being politically correct. This was always about afflicting the comfortable while comforting the afflicted. That is the foundation of social justice. Dr. Duck, when it comes to that hashtag, it did start out as something that was catchy. That's kind of the way social media works. But how much does it, one, make people uncomfortable when much of social media is all about snark? It's all about making your point within 140 characters. Is it going to be enough? It's carried itself for 18 months to 2 years now, but is it going to be something that's going to be able to be generational shaking, something that we'll talk about 15 years from now and have tangible things in place as a result?
I think the Black Lives Matter hashtag is important. Right now there are 26 different chapters about Black Lives Matter and there are tons of umbrella organizations. I think being critical of Black Lives Matter is a way of silencing the discussion about the suffering of black people and anti-black sentiment, about not having that conversation.
So do you think that do people, when they bring up the All Lives Matter, are they doing it because they don't understand Black Lives Matter, or are they doing it specifically to shut down the conversation that makes people uncomfortable about where we are with race in 2015 with the first African-American president in the White House?
I think it's both. I mean, I think there is this discomfort in talking about race. I think they, to focus on the issues and the suffering that black people are going through in this country is problematic for a lot of people. And to see racialized poverty, to see so many black families, children, living in concentrated poverty areas across this country. And then if we think about the origins of the Black Lives Matter hashtag, it was after George Zimmerman was acquitted for the murder of Trayvon Martin. I mean, so it grew, and it has a way of capturing not only Eric Gardner's I Can't Breathe or Hands Up, Don't Shoot. Black Lives Matter is a way of putting the focus back on the issues facing black Americans.
But that's still the issue I have, and I'm bringing it over this part of the table. Minister Muhammad, I'm bringing it to you first. You were bringing this up, but I wanted to even say this in the last break. Again, this hashtag, some of the comments we've already said on the show seem to primarily focus on African Americans, police, and more importantly, African Americans in disadvantaged neighborhoods and police. But if we're talking about Black Lives Matter, shouldn't this be, like I said in the starting point, more encompassive when it comes to everything from schooling to school vouchers? No one said Black Lives Matter to President Obama when he was cutting off the DC voucher program or suing the state of Louisiana. When it comes to the pro-life movement, nobody says Black Lives Matter. In fact, when black pro-lifers use that for the pro-life movement, they get bashed for that. So it seems as though this hashtag activism of Black Lives Matter is very, very specific. And if it is, as I'm observing, is that not very dangerous because it minimizes what could be a true movement moving forward?
Well, again, the true issue here is justice. And if we're to have justice, justice represents balance. Now, I think it's something that when the Tea Party stole a page out of the playbook of the civil rights movement and started their movement, boy, that was just a good demonstration of civic engagement. But now that it's Black Lives Matter, all lives didn't matter when we were at the bottom of every negative category. We're at the top. Diabetes, cancer, incarceration,
and I agree with you, but let me ask you this before I go to break. Is that something that the activists of Black Lives Matter, those that are pushing this hashtag, are they talking about the issues that you and I concur on right now, or are they only focused in a very myopic sense on some of the high-profile cases?
I think they're looking at all of the cases. It's just what the media chooses to cover, because they're looking at women's rights, they're looking at educational rights, they're looking at other opportunities, but the great journalistic push right now is just police brutality. And I believe that puts us on a narrow focus anyway, because ultimately, when it goes through the court system, the court is still judging them justified, showing that black lives do not matter in the United States of America.
We'll continue this conversation and see how far Black Lives Matter really applies to all the activists out there. Is it just about police brutality or much more? We're going to expand this conversation and dive deep into it. Don't go anywhere. We're talking about that here on Night Talk. Get to the point. One of the incidents that prompted the Black Lives Matter movement and brought it to national and, dare I say, even international regard was the Trayvon Martin situation that initially came up in 2012. But another incident that also prompted this was the Michael Brown situation in Ferguson. Minister Muhammad, there were controversies around both of those incidences, particularly the Michael Brown situation once the autopsy came out, the trial, the lack of indictment, etc. But with that said, does it even matter at this point in time that there were these controversies around Michael Brown or these controversies around Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, because it now sparked an awareness that people weren't willing to voice prior to these incidences from a couple of years ago? And now that we see more high-profile situations coming out, it's more for a fuse for people to get out and get moving?
It does matter, because what it addresses is the issue that without a camera, black people are not believed. And those in authority get the benefit of the doubt, and they are not held to the standard of a professional. And with that being the case, it matters because there's this unwritten law that if it's a young black man, he's aggressive and he deserved it. As any kind of excuse will do. Had it not been for a camera in South Carolina, Mr. Scott's case would have never came out. He would have deserved it some type of way, even though he got shot in the back. So yes, it does matter, because we have to bring these issues to the forefront. That there's, and I'm shocked that Chief McClay always talks about there's this hidden prejudice that comes with all of us. I forget the exact technical term that he uses.
Implied bias.
Complied bias.
Implied bias.
Implied bias, yes. Implied bias.
Which leads to stop and frisk, which still needs to leave Pittsburgh, but I digress.
Which still needs to, no, you did not digress. That's progress. Because as long as if we have these guaranteed rights that are not guaranteed, because stop and frisk doesn't happen in Squirrel Hill, but it happens in Homewood. It happens among black youth because we always fit the description regardless of whom or what.
Leon, I know that you started a petition to stop and frisk here in the city of Pittsburgh. I know that you've taken your mission. You just got done speaking up at MIT in Massachusetts last week. When you're talking to people out there, whether it's in inner city communities or at universities such as MIT, what's the overall message that they are looking to hear from somebody like you so that the Black Lives Matter hashtag activism becomes more than just something that's spread around on Twitter or on Instagram?
One of the biggest things they want to hear from me is, how did I manage? How did I manage even though I didn't get help from an Al Sharpton or a Jesse Jackson? How did I organize rallies, and what am I doing now? Because I'm not organizing rallies anymore. In the beginning, you know, I thought all I had to do was organize rallies to get attention to create change, but now I know I have to be at tables with critical thinkers like myself, thinking about policies that we're going to change. How could we, you know, change these policies so we can see real change? Because there's policies set in place that allows something like an officer to shoot someone, and he has 72 hours before he has to make a statement on the shootings. There's policies, the police, what is it? The police Bill of Rights. There's different things like the police Bill of Rights that gives police officers, you know, authority to do bad things, and you know, they really have a little bit more leeway than we do.
So let me ask you this: do you think that that's what the shift is, where previously it was looking towards Reverend Jackson, Reverend Sharp, and looking towards a civil rights activist, one activist to get behind, whereas now your generation is saying, no, between social media, between us organizing each other, between the world getting smaller, we can do these things ourselves, and they see examples such as yourself out there. Is that what's bringing about the necessary change and the shift that people are looking for now?
Yes, sir. There's a lot of young people, critical thinkers at these tables, you know, changing these policies. So when you see, you know, 1 million people using the hashtag Black Lives Matter, just understand there's about 100,000 of us who's not just using social media, you know, to get attention, but we're at these tables and we're thinking of ways to really create change. And, you know, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So a lot of the things that we're discussing, a lot of the things that we're doing behind the scenes are not going to be public for about the next 3 to 5 years.
It's something to leverage off, and when we come back from break, what are the next steps? What does this movement look like moving forward? And how does this unite the country at a time where we seem to be so divisive and so divided in so many different ways? We'll continue this conversation here on PCNC in just a second.